Welcome to another episode of Life in Focus, where we dive into the world of real estate through real-life experiences and insights from our guest. I'm your host, Ben Tate, and today I'm joined by Anthony Frook. Anthony, appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we dive into things, this episode, I really want to dive into the challenges of renting, finding the perfect neighborhood, and a little bit about your journey towards purchasing your first home here in Florida. But before we get into that, you want to kind of just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background, and how you made it to St. Pete.
Yeah, definitely. I am a sales ops analyst, and I work in the SaaS industry, software as a service. And so sales ops analyst, I'm kind of the one behind the scenes that's looking at the numbers and the processes, basically helping the business make decisions that make them the most money. My journey to St. Pete, I've lived in Kansas City for most of my life. I had moved out to Denver about 5 years ago where I met my wife, and her family is out in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And so it had always been kind of a long-term goal of ours to get out to the East Coast. We're both beach people, and so Florida was always at the top of our list. We had a couple of cities that we had just through word of mouth been recommended to, and we've got some of our family that's down here in the Tampa and St. Pete area. It wasn't honestly at the top of our list originally, but once we came down here and spent a weekend in St. Pete, we really fell in love with the feel of the city. It had a lot in common with Kansas City, so also had kind of a homey, natural feel for us right off the bat. And from there, I started doing my research on Zillow, looking at openings, postings for houses that were coming up for rent, and just went from there. Things fell into place and moved down here about a month and a half ago.
Very good. So I know you mentioned, being closer to family or having family ties to Florida, enjoying the homey feel of St. Pete. But were there some other cities that you guys gave a really strong consideration to prior to choosing St. Pete?
Yeah, it was really between Jacksonville, Tampa, and then a few smaller cities that were down the West Coast. Like we looked at Hudson and Tarpon Springs. I think ultimately we really liked St. Pete because it is a city, but it's also got kind of that smaller community feel to it. And having grown up in the suburbs, I like having easy access to like a Target and a Starbucks. I like being able to quickly go grab what I need. And so there's a lot of easy access to that. And then of course, just like the beaches, like the natural beauty of the area was really attractive to us. So yeah.
Very good. So how long have you been in St. Pete so far? A little bit over a month, you'd say?
Yeah, a little bit over a month.
Okay, so you're still really early in the exploration stage, I would say.
Yeah.
Kind of finding your favorite spots.
Yes.
Do you feel it's pretty easy to get around the city so far? I know when you go to a new city, you're learning the one ways and like, oh crap, I got to go around again. Or, I know a lot of people speak about, when they move to a big city, maybe the parking's a little bit different, obviously coming from the Midwest that you came from. So has that been an issue, or has it been pretty?
Yeah, that's been one of the big pros that I talk to my family about when they're asking how things are going. Is it's just really easy to get around St. Pete. I feel like there's a couple of main roads that I can pretty much take to get anywhere that I want to go, and so still exploring, but I found it's pretty easy to get around. That's thankfully.
Good. So do you have any favorite restaurants so far?
Yeah.
You've gone twice, because I know a lot of people, they say the food's great in St. Pete. I've lived all over the state of Florida, and one of the drawbacks that used to be the drawback of the West Coast, outside of it being a little bit slower paced living, was that the food wasn't as good as the East Coast of Florida, right?
Yeah.
Because the East Coast of Florida, from Palm Beach County, Dade, Broward, they're inspired from the Northeast, and so there's a lot of good food in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, etc. And so I think a lot of that's come down, especially exacerbated by COVID and corporations and companies moving down here. Better for taxes, better quality of life, you could argue as well. So I know when I first moved to St. Pete, it probably took me 6 to 8 months before I duplicated a restaurant I went to previously, just because there's so many options.
Yeah.
So you might have, there's probably a couple restaurants you've already been to probably 5 times, I would imagine, or eateries. But what do you have some favorites already?
Yeah, definitely. It helps having a plug like you that has good recommendations for us. I really like Noble Crust.
Okay.
That's one of the places I've been twice. Casita has moved onto my list of like
Casita's fire.
kind of like replacing Chipotle. Yeah. A place that we tried that I want to go back to is I like Pia's a lot.
Okay.
Really good like meat at Pia's. So yeah.
Absolutely. So what would you say is like the biggest adjustment? I know there's been a lot of positives moving here, but what's been the biggest adjustment from either moving here from Kansas City or even Denver? What would you say is the biggest adjustment? Just it's the weather-wise?
Yeah,
or?
It's cliche, but it's like the heat. We moved in like the middle of summer, and like I was prepared for it to be hot, but just like every day nonstop, the heat and humidity. It's like in Kansas City in the Midwest, it's in the summertime. That's when I'm like getting out, and I'm trying to spend as much time as I can outdoors, and I feel like it's kind of flip-flop now. I got to wait for like the fall and the winter to be able to spend all my time outside.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Hey, well, Florida is always going to be hot, but I don't know. Some people might argue, but I think the fall is actually pretty decent down here. It's still going to get up into the 80s. You may have a couple, days in the 90s, but I think it's pretty comfortable for Florida standards.
That's perfect.
I'm looking forward to seeing what your, what your thoughts are after you get through your first winter down here, so to speak. But so I know, the goal for you coming down here was to ideally find a home to purchase. Kind of take that next step. Have you owned a home or purchased a home previously?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so that makes it even more of a bigger decision. It's already a big decision, but that makes it even bigger. Especially when you never made such a big purchase before. You want to make sure that you're comfortable with it, that you don't rush into it, and so you're renting now, which I think is a smart move for anybody to do if they're not they're unsure if they're you just don't want to rush into something big because you have to move. A lot of times when people need to make a move because of their career or they know their lease is ending, and they say, hey, instead of me shelling out money for first, last, and security deposit, that's almost going to be in some cases my full down payment on a purchase, maybe 50% of my down payment on a purchase. So that's a lot of money to allocate because the time it takes just to get back to 10 grand in savings could be a while for some people, right? Life is tough and expensive, and we spend $1 every day we leave the house, right? So that's obviously a big decision you had to make to say, hey, we're just going to pump the brakes a little bit on the home purchase and rent for rent. And I think it's smart too because obviously you're coming into a state that you never lived into, let alone a city you never lived in and probably only visited seldomly in your whole life. And so I think just understanding the neighborhoods, understanding from renting where you're going to frequent the most anyways, I think that's a positive thing. But again, you've only been here a little bit over a month, so I wanted to ask you a little bit how, about your experience renting, but I know right now largely your experience renting was your experience getting the rental and getting moved in, right? That's been the bulk of it. So let's talk about that a little bit. Where did you start when you were looking for a home to rent? Did you reach out to somebody to work with? Were you trying to do kind of, your own self-research, so to speak, and make the phone calls yourself? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I've been since I don't own a home yet, I've rented everywhere that I live, and so I've basically been moving every 2 to 3 years somewhere new, and so it's a process that I've gotten pretty familiar with. I think the biggest piece for me that I've learned that's crucial to it is using my network and using recommendations, because I can spend hours, I can do all the research in the world on my own, but ultimately the best source of like recommendations is going to be people that live there, especially someone like yourself that has experience in real estate. And so I really lean on my network and recommendations that they're making. I think for myself, I do just a lot of research on Zillow. I'm first deciding, how much am I willing to spend in a month? What are the basics as far as how much space do I need? Do I need 2 or 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, that kind of thing? Set up those filters on Zillow and then kind of layer that with recommendations that I have like from people that live there as to areas that I should really focus my search on. But ultimately, like it's tough. The market's tough. And I kind of had to just roll with what was available,
Sure.
so to speak. And so that's why I keep saying that like my network and recommendations end up playing such a big role, because I can see the house online, but it really I really have to go by what people are telling me about the area
Sure.
or about the house, or having you go see it in advance since
Yeah.
I'm 18 hours away, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, so I guess in your experience, you rented not only just moving down here, but other times in your life. So when you moved down here specifically, from the list price of what something was, listed to be rented for and what they were maybe willing to rent it for once you spoke to them, was there a large variance there consistently, or was it maybe $100, $200 there, or were they pretty strict on list prices, what we'll rent it for?
It was pretty strict depending on how long they had been looking for someone to rent. There might be a little bit of flexibility, like you said, $100 to $200, but I kind of was expecting to not really be able to negotiate that. In the past, though, I have, like, everywhere else that I've lived before St. Pete, I've lived in apartment complexes, or like complexes where it's a flat rate that they're charging everybody else. I think when I moved to St. Pete, I knew that I wanted a single family home, and was likely going to be working with a landlord, like an individual that this is their property, and so they might have a little bit more leeway there. But honestly, it just wasn't something that I had as a goal or intention going into the conversations, was to negotiate on price. I was more so focused on just finding a place.
Finding a good place
Yeah.
that made that, checked as many boxes as possible.
Exactly,
Sure.
yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Did you find that, that you were attracted to certain neighborhoods from a rental perspective that did warrant an extra $100, $200 for rentals? Did you find it tough to find places that accepted pets? I know St. Pete's, it's huge. It's huge, in the dog community. So, was that a difficulty at all? Was it pretty simple?
It was pretty simple with the pets thing. There were a few homes where I was like, damn, I wish that it said that it was pet friendly. Some of the newer homes, I think especially, you could tell that they just put a lot of work into
They were a little scared, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like, and as far as neighborhoods, again, it was like I had heard things about like historic Kenwood and like areas of Gulfport that are just really attractive, and people that live down here had just positive things to say about it. And so in my head, I was thinking, yeah, I'm willing to maybe spend a little bit more to live there. So yeah.
Oh, very good. So if you could share some tips with somebody else that might be in your same situation, they say, hey, I want to move down to this area. I'm not sure where I want to buy yet. I want to rent. What tips would you have for them, as they, begin their search for a rental?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that was really helpful for me was mapping out the areas that I knew that I wanted to focus my search on, because it can be overwhelming. There's so many listings out there when you just go on to a place like Zillow or just marketplaces like that. It can be overwhelming. So if you're able to narrow down your search onto some of those areas and just have really a checklist of your need to haves that you're able to, kind of a preliminary filter on anything that
Sure.
you're looking for. And then talking to people that are from the area, doing research on like even like Reddit, like a community place where you can see what people have to say about like a certain area. If there's maybe like crime or something that I didn't think about, like doing a little bit of that research. So, but just not getting discouraged, because you're gonna see houses that you love and might want to move forward with, but there's so many people out there looking to rent and to get into homes, and so you're not always going to be able to get that dream home. But if you're consistent in your searching efforts and kind of like space out your efforts and put out more inquiries, as many inquiries as possible, it's kind of like they'll trickle in, through to the next steps.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of times too, when you're renting a property, you should be really prioritizing convenience.
Yeah.
And when you're purchasing a property, you should be prioritizing criteria.
Yeah.
right? And you mentioned, you're not renting your forever home, right?
Yeah.
Per se. And so, I think that's important to understand. And I know, a good kind of first step. Let's say you don't have any family or friends from the area, but you got to move there because your company's moving you over there, or life takes you to this certain destination where you have no ties. A quick, easy thing that you can do is pull up Airbnb and go look at where the most concentration of Airbnbs or most popular Airbnbs are in that city, because they're there for a reason, right? They're there for convenience. Airbnb only works if the location is convenient to downtowns, beaches, whatever the case is. So that's a good, a lot of times, like you said, you could rent somewhere that might be like the hood or a crime-ridden area, or maybe it's too family-centric for, the lifestyle that you want to live, or whatever the case may be. So I always tell people, go on Airbnb, put Superhost, slider on, and look at, 5-star only in certain locations. And you say, okay, well, I know I need to be around either Gulfport or Kentwood because it's close to downtown and it's nearby Tropicana or wherever the case is. So that's always a good little tip. So what, I guess, speaking of criteria, what's your personal criteria as you continue to look for a neighborhood, that you might want to invest in?
Yeah. The first things that I look at when I'm looking at a home, once it meets the basic criteria of it has enough space for me and my future family plans, and it has a yard for my dog. Once, those boxes are checked, I like to look at things like the neighborhood score, like its walkability and its like biking convenience, walking and biking convenience, its proximity to like public transit, and then the school districts too. I think those are important to look at, because you can also kind of, gauge the safe, not necessarily the safety, but gauge the feel of the neighborhood based on kind of the school districts that are there.
Sure.
Yeah.
The expectations of that neighborhood. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because crime can be anywhere, it's spotty, but
Right.
obviously, the school ratings and stuff is more of a long-term, rating. So that makes a lot of sense. So what about from a timeline perspective? What's obviously goals are meant to be moved and be flexible, but as of today, what's your goal or your timeline? Is it the end of your current lease term to find a house to purchase? Would you guys consider, signing a secondary lease term just to make sure you feel comfortable again on that purchase? Or, I guess where do you sit right now with that?
Yeah, that's something that I've been starting to think a lot more about since we got down here. Once I found out that I like where I live and I like this home, and I could, if I needed to, I could comfortably extend that lease. I think a lot of my next steps are also kind of contingent on what happens in the market with interest rates and housing prices. Florida, luckily, especially this area, we're kind of fortunate with how the housing market is here. It's on kind of the positive end of the spectrum as far as places that have been impacted by things like interest rates and housing prices. But I think I'm waiting for some of those things to happen in the economy before I know I'm ready to go all in on my home search and putting all of my efforts into working with my realtor on finding, on really pouncing on new listings and like being quick to respond, and knowing that, I've got that money and I'm ready to put it down when something comes onto the market. So, I mean, ideally, the housing market has cooled down a little bit by the end of my lease next summer, but I'm kind of willing to wait a little. I'm not super eager to get out of my current situation because I like it. So, yeah.
Which is funny because I think a lot of people are in that boat too, especially when they come to St. Pete, where, again, where you're renting now is a similar neighborhood that you might end up purchasing in, right? So what's the difference to some degree, right? And I see both sides of the coin. Obviously, I've been in real estate for almost 10 years now, so I'm typically biased towards investing over renting.
Yeah.
But I also am biased towards making sure that you're doing the best thing you should be doing for your financial situation now, and more importantly, 3 to 5 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Because I always say, figure out where you want to be in 3 years and 5 years from now. And it sounds cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason, right? And so, but by figuring out where you want to be in 3 and 5 years from now, it's going to answer some of the questions you have, right? So how much space do I need to get, right? Right now, you might be thinking, okay, if I had 1,800 square feet, that'd be great, or 1,500 square feet, whatever. And another thing too is a lot of people don't really understand square footage and size, right? And I mean that relative to, for instance, like a 2-car garage is on average 450, 460 square feet, right? And that's a decent size, right? And you, even if you look at the average hotel room, maybe, right, that might be 250 to 350 square feet, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's a double bedroom with a bathroom, a little kitchenette, right? And then if you know anybody that lives up in New York or in Chicago and these, dense cities where square footage is small, it really gives you perspective as to how much square footage you actually really need from a practicality standpoint.
Yeah.
And so those are all important because, again, prices largely go on, off of square footage from a sale perspective or a valuation perspective. But the good thing about renting is that you have the option of moving when you want to. I think that is important. But a lot of people have the thought process that you just shared right now, which is, one of the factors is you're waiting for the housing market to cool off, so to speak. But I would say that shouldn't be as a driving factor as the other two things you mentioned, which is understanding the neighborhood and where you want to actually be, and two, obviously the financial part of it. Financial part of it's always going to be the cornerstone.
Yeah,
can't do something if you're not prepared to do that thing, right? So, but the thing is right now the housing market has cooled off, so to speak. This is probably as cool as we're going to see it down here, because Florida's one of the few states that's going to offset what we see in the general economy, because there's people retiring every day. There's people that, okay, let's say they do have to downsize their lifestyle, and they do come from up north or out west where it's more expensive to live. Well, they can come here and it's less of a drop off from their lifestyle, right? And so because Florida's cheaper, because of the tax situation, and because of Florida, with the weather and you can wake up any day and pretty much do what you want from, an outdoor activity standpoint.
Yeah.
That's going to offset a lot of the downturn. That's going to offset some of the high interest rates that we're seeing. That's why what you'll see in Florida is things will slow down a little bit. So in other markets, you'll see people think values are decreasing. Right? In some markets, they're not decreasing. The issue is that 80% of real estate agents won't be in 3 years, right? So under that logic, and the reason is because of the fees, and if they're not making transactions, they're not making closings, they're not making enough money to, keep the overhead going to make it profitable for them to do it long term and pay their own bills, right? And so if 80% of real estate agents won't be per that stat, that means 80% of listings you see on Zillow are not accurate based on what the valuation of that property is compared to what it's listed at right now, right? And so a lot of times when we're searching for a home, we'll put our sliders on, right? We'll say, hey, show me everything in this neighborhood from $250,000 to $400,000, and so we're not seeing anything above $400,000 from a list perspective, right? But 80% of real estate agents won't be in 3 years, which means that there's a good chance that there's things listed at 425, 450, 475 that are still only worth 400. And after 3 weeks of it sitting on the market and not getting enough showings or any offers on the table, they're doing 20 grand decreases at a time.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what you're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Even if you go home today and you favorited 10 places and you watch those listings over the next month, you'll see massive price drops. Something that we didn't see, obviously, during like the frenzy, at the end of 2020 through 2022. But that's a big thing, right? And that's why, again, hiring a real estate agent will help with that. But again, that kind of contradicts what I just said, because 80% of the people that you could hire aren't going to be there in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's important to note because, things, and that happens a little bit on the rental side of things too, mainly on the buy side where, typically rents are going to be more in line with where rent should be, because they're just looking at other apartments and condos locally and what they're listing things for. And it's easier because people put that on their websites and stuff like that, and that's going to be a little bit more concrete. But that's something to keep in mind. But I say all that to say that when interest rates come down a little bit, the prices of houses are going to go up.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people have said, hey, I'm waiting for the interest rates to come down. I'm like, well, if you're waiting to come down, now you're going to be in a multiple offer situation.
Yeah.
Where I have plenty of friends that were in that situation in 2022, 2021, where it took them 10 offers on 10 different properties before they were able to land one, because people that have cash on the sidelines right now are like, hey, I'll pay 10, 20, 30 grand over appraised value because of the school zone, because of the amenities, because of the neighborhood, because of the transportation right around the corner, right? And so that's the issue that I think a lot of people our age are going to fall into is, we have a lot of 2-income households, right now. And so people are making some money. I think we're learning better habits when it comes to budgeting and living expenses and stuff like that, as best as we can. Things are going to keep going up. It just is what it is. But I'm just fearful for a lot of people that have the goal of owning a house, which is, the American dream, which is becoming harder and harder to do,
Yeah.
that are waiting for prices or interest rates, excuse me, to come down, but prices are going to, they're going to go up as soon as, if we get down to the low fives. I think right now you can get a primary for right around 6.25, depending on your credit score. But even if that comes down 100 basis points to 5.25, you're going to see prices go up. You're going to see more multiple offer situations. So right now it's definitely a buyer's market, right? Where you can go in there, you can get concessions. And that's why it's so important. So I would really implore people that are thinking about buying, they're like, I need to buy in the next 6 months, or I need to buy in the next 12 months. I would really do their homework right now, because right now is when you can go in, put an offer on something, actually pay what it's worth, maybe even. So let me back up a little bit. A lot of people that have, maybe it takes only 10 grand to get into the property, and they have that, right? But they're still saying, I'm going to wait till the interest rates come down,
Yeah.
right? So these are really the people I'm talking to, right? Not the people that don't have that money ready yet. But if you're close to it and you have that ready, the concessions are everything, right? Because this concession basically means, let's say I want to sell a property to you for 450 grand. And I say, hey, you say, hey, I'll buy that for 450 grand, but would you give me a 10 grand concession? So what that means is I'm only going to net 440, and 10 grand of that sale is going to go towards your closing costs, your down payment, whatever the case may be. But that's 10 grand cash, and cash is king when you buy a property, because that's the whole leverage, right? And so a lot of people, to get a conventional loan, they'll put down 5% of the purchase price, right? So if we use the easier numbers, use $400,000, 5% of that's just 20 grand, right? But if I give you a $10,000 concession, now you only have to come to the table with 10 grand cash, right? You're never going to get a concession like that when it's a seller's market, right? And so as soon as interest rates go down, it's going to become a seller's market. And so, again, when it comes to concessions, when it comes to, concessions can mean a lot of different things. It can be a cash concession. It could be other different types of concessions. It just means something the seller's willing to give up to get this property sold or under contract or whatever the case is. You're not going to have that when interest rates go down. You're not going to have that, when the market turns. And so that's why you can use these tools to your advantage now. And, it could offset the interest rates today, right? And if you plan on holding it, again, that's why it all comes down to what's your plan for 3 years, what's your plan for 5 years, what's your plan for 7 years. Because if you say, hey, I don't plan for leaving for 10 years, well, I'm sure the interest rates are going to have some movement over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
You can refinance, you can pull some cash out. Maybe your equity rose in that time frame to where if you only put 5% down in that example, maybe by the time you refinance, you already have gained that extra 15% in equity, right? So now you drop off your PMI and your interest rate goes down lower, right? Because if you don't put down if you don't have at least 20% equity into a property, you have to pay primary mortgage insurance, right? Which is going to run you on average $200 to $300 a month, right? And so if you can drop off $300 a month, plus maybe drop off another $300 a month from your interest rate going down, now your payment goes down $600, and you still had the house, this whole time, right? And you're still investing in yourself instead of, obviously investing in somebody else's pocket, right?
Yeah.
Because even $2 grand a month, that's 25 grand a year you're giving away to somebody else. That 25 grand a year would have went and bought you that 400 grand house,
Right.
in 1 year. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of it is just understanding kind of the supply and demand, how things work. But again, Florida is an anomaly, just the state of Florida. And that's if you're in the middle of nowhere in Polk County or whatever. But then you start going to the most popular cities in Florida, whether it's the Tampa Bay, St. Pete area, whether it's Orlando, whether it's Palm Beach County on the other coast, whether it's even Fort Myers, Lee County, which is growing right now as well. That's going to offset a lot of, we're not going to, when we see economic downturn, the values here just won't grow as quickly, right? But they're not going to go down, right? And so in other markets, you can see more stabilized values or maybe some dips in values as a whole. Again, you can't look at list price, right? Because that's going to move around a lot. You can see a listing, again, go from 500 list, but actually sell at 425. And, again, that goes back to a lot of incompetent real estate agents. Or if I'm a real estate agent and I'm trying to get you to let me sell your house, and you say, hey, I think this thing's worth 500 grand, and I know it's only worth 425, I'm not going to get the listing if I, shoot you down, right? I'm like, you're wrong. Because a lot of times people, they redid the floors of the bathrooms, they lived here for 10 years, or they raised their daughter here, whatever the case is, right? So they're like, they have those emotional ties to the property. Like, I know it's worth 500, and so for you to secure the listing as a real estate agent, you say, okay, we'll list it for 500, and if it doesn't sell, are you okay with a price decrease? They say, okay, and that's how it works, right? And so that's why you see these things fluctuate so much. Which, again, outside looking in, your peers will think that you're not competent because a $70K price decrease doesn't look great. You know what I'm saying? But that's what's happening out there. And it's hard to kind of navigate that. But, I would just say, I know a lot of people are worried about buying a property today because they think that if values if values are going down, which they aren't, but if they think that they are, then they don't want to buy something that's, worth less tomorrow than it was today. Right. But I would just tell you, good real estate always appreciates over time.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So again, as long as you're making a smart, conscious purchase based on location, based on, the neighborhood and the amenity factors that you mentioned, I think you'll be okay. But I would just warn you to, as soon as you get to a position to where you're comfortable making a purchase from the financial perspective, there's always a good deal to be had. I bought property every single year since 2018. And even in 2018, people told me the market wasn't good. And back then, if you had a perfect credit score of 5.25 was a great interest rate to have. Then obviously you fast forward 2021, and now you can get sub 3 interest rates on properties. So that's great. And then, buying property last year, we were getting 6% interest rates. And so it's going to change, but good real estate always appreciates over time, and you just got to kind of factor that in. And at the end of the day, if you're able to put 5% down on a $400,000 or $500,000 purchase, I mean, that's pretty crazy. That's like a 25% or a 25% or 1/4 of what an American Express credit card interest rate is. You know what I'm saying? So when we start to step back and look at, and then back in the day, if you think back in, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, when people had 8-9% interest rates on homes. Granted, homes were 140 grand, 150 grand, but still, I think we just have a lot of recency bias.
Yeah,
and a lot of people that have that bias don't even have the expertise in real estate, right? It's almost like on politics, like we just hear what we hear, and then we think we know what's going on. But it's like, hey, you don't even know the backstory of any of this stuff, on either side. So it's the same thing for real estate, right? We just hear like, oh, interest rates are high, I'm going to wait. It's like, well, have you done research? Have you seen what's going on? And again, because it's a buyer's market, there's people that are in the same boat as you who had a job or had other things bring you down to the state, where there's people that are bringing them out of the state, right? And so just because the economy is bad doesn't mean they don't need to sell their house, right? Yeah. And people that have owned their house for 10, 20, 30 years might have so much equity in their house that for them, they say, hey, if I sell it at list, I walk away with 300 grand cash in my pocket, or I come down 30 grand and I walk away with 270. They don't really care at that point. What's 30 grand to save their time, money, effort, and just get it done, right? And so you're going to get the most deals right now than you're going to get in 1 year from now. It's just simply put, it's going to be the case, Not rushing you personally to make that choice, but just saying to people out there, you'd just be surprised at the deals that you can get today as opposed to, just waiting. And then it's going to be, again, more competition. And the issue is when you have more competition is this. Let's go back to that example. Let's say there's a house listed for 400 grand, right? And you say, okay, I'll buy that house. And then, they have multiple offers come in and they say, listen, for you to get this house and for us to agree to the contract, you're going to have to come to 420. We got another offer at 420, but you were the first one. We'll let you counter first. You say, okay, I really want this house. We're emotionally invested already, even though you shouldn't be too close, but I am. And so we'll do 420. And they say, okay, you get to week 3 of being under contract. You pass your inspection period. Now your escrow is no. Now you could lose your escrow if you pull out the contract now, right? Because you already passed your inspection period. And now you get to week 3 and they get the appraisal done. And guess what? The appraisal comes in at 400 grand, right? The only reason why it went from 400 to 420 was because there was multiple offers, right? So now you or a buyer, most buyers are going to be financing buyers, right? Whether it's conventional FHA, USDA, VA, whatever loan they get, it's financing, which means the bank needs to make sure that the collateral is worth what it is, right? And so basically, in short, you'd have to come up in that example, $20,000 in cash separate from the down payment obligations to get that house, right? Most people are going to say, hey, I can't do that, right? I have the 20 grand I have is for the down payment. I don't have 40 grand, And so that now you lose out on the house, and that is what happened all of 2021 in St. Pete and 2022 in St. Pete. Right. And so for all the buyers out there that think that they're going to just wait till interest rates come down, till, they think prices will come down with interest rate, which they won't. You're going to have more competitive buyers. And if you are financing the home, it's going to be much tougher because if the contract price is above the value, the valuation, you're going to have to come out more cash out of pocket. You know what I'm saying? So just some good things to keep in mind. But I mean, from an emotional standpoint, are you excited, nervous?
I'm super excited, and I think that, my lease is going to be done next summer, and so now I'm thinking like, if I am financially in a position where I'm able to, move forward, or because it fits in with my plan. I know I want to buy a house, and so I'm sitting here thinking like, well, where do I start, right?
Yeah.
And I've got I still have 10 months left on my lease, and does it make sense for me to start having conversations now, or I guess what?
Well, this is what I would
recommend?
suggest. I would suggest to most everybody that's looking to buy a house. A lot of people, the most common I'll just say reason, to be nice about it. The most common reason that people will tell you when they're not ready to buy a house now is, I think we're going to buy in 1 year from now. And 1 more year. 1 year is like the cliche excuse, push it off. And so, okay, if you have a whole year that you're, thinking that you're going to push it off, I would go get pre-approved once a year. Once a year.
Yeah.
It's going to do a soft credit run, which is a couple points in your credit score. You have a whole year to get that back up. It's not going to do much. If you already have a good credit score, it's not going to do much to it. But the biggest thing is know what you can afford now. Because if you don't really know what you can afford, you can get pre-approved in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of lenders that would love to do it, right? You can get pre-approved from 5 different lenders at the same time. And then your credit pool is not going to be, if you get them all the same day or within a couple of days, it's not going to be a big credit.
Pool,
yeah. So that's what that would be the first step that I would say, is go get pre-approved. Because you might have all these lofty dreams of 400K houses, and they say, hey man, we can't approve you over 300. And you say, okay, well, I know what 300 can get me. I'm not in the mood for that.
Yeah.
So now I know.
Helps me prioritize.
Yeah, because you might say, listen, for what I want, what I know I want, I might need to wait 2 years before I can buy it, right? And so maybe 1 year was pretty lofty, right? Maybe it was an excuse. Maybe you're 2-3 years, right? And so I would tell everyone, go get pre-approved. And A, you're going to know where you stand.
Yeah.
B, you might stand better than you think you are. And then C, now you can take the next step and start qualifying a realtor that you want to work with. And they're going to be more apt to work with you because now you have a piece of paper that says, hey, he can afford X, Y, and Z. You know what I'm saying? So that to me would be the first step.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to ask you, have you start talking to any real estate agents or thought about mortgages or any of that? But
I've thought about it, but yeah, it's kind of like it's one of those things where I just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of people, where to start, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's funny too, because even when you go through the courses of getting your real estate license, it's like college. You learn the application part of it, or you learn the theory part of it. You don't learn application, right? So no matter what you get a degree in, that company's still going to take 2 weeks to train you on their application. And so real estate's the same way. It's like you can take all the tests and stuff, but most real estate agents, once they get their license, they still have to go to Keller Williams, Remax, whatever, for a couple months and learn how to write a contract.
Yeah.
If you can't even buy a house, what do I do first? I don't know. I have my license, but I don't know what to do with it. And so that's a big part of it. And obviously home buyers, again, you only know what you've done before or what somebody's done before and took the time to teach you about, right? And so, each one teach one. That's how you're going to get some information on it. But just knowing the right questions to ask too, right? And so again, starting off with getting pre-approved, it's always the first thing, because from that information, you'll have the better questions to ask, right? Hey, I like these 3 neighborhoods. Do you think I can find something in this price point there? Maybe this one, maybe not this one. You're right, so you're starting to kind of funnel down to what's real. And that's going to help you find a good real estate agent too, right? So you can say, hey, do you do a lot of transactions in St. Pete, or are you more Tampa? Are you more South Tampa? Are you more Bradenton? How long, so you can start vetting them more based on where you want to, neighborhoods you want to go to, the transactions they've actually done there. How successful have you been securing buyers' concession to help buyers out? As a first-time home buyer, there's already going to be other programs out there that are going to allow you to have, certain credits or maybe a lower interest rate or whatever the case may be. Again, when things are slow, everyone's slow. The lenders are slow right now, right? So again, not only if you buy a home in the next 6 to 12 months are you going to have, a better and easier path from a buyer concession standpoint, from a competition standpoint, but the lenders are going to be more eager to get the deal done, meaning that you won't run into as many appraisal hookups because, again, if the appraiser is valuing properties below purchase price, well, that's not good for the lender because now that killed the deal for the lender, right? But the lender hires the appraiser, right? So although the appraiser is supposed to be third-party objective, if he's not closing deals for the lender, he's not going to be hired by that lender. So now he doesn't get work. So there's supposed to be some some non-bias objectivity, but at the end of the day, the appraiser needs a lender to hire him. lender's only going to hire him if he's giving them appraised values you need. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like you're in the perfect time right now when things are slower. Again, not just you, anybody that's thinking about it, I would just say, a lot of times when you say I'm going to do something a year later, we don't start the research till a year later. So I'm just imploring people to start thinking about these things now, and they'd be surprised at how little cash you need to leverage the good credit and the good, the good habits that you've had your whole life that you've been taught to do. You can, it's all come down to this, right?
Yeah, and it's like for me, and I think a lot of other people that are first-time home buyers. There's so much noise and what we hear every day from just, I don't even know what to call it, but I know I personally hear a lot. Basically, if you buy a house right now, you're an idiot. Like, you should be waiting, that kind of thing. But then also it's and this isn't anything personal at you, but I think the differing opinion when you hear that from a real estate agent, sometimes it can come off as like salesy, like like this person's the only reason that they're telling me that I'm not an idiot if I buy a house now is because they want to make money off of me.
Yeah.
And so this kind of stuff is really helpful because it's not something that I'm used to hearing, and it's education that I know that I need to set myself up for success when I, start taking those steps.
Absolutely. And you brought up a good point too, because a lot of people say, okay, well, you're telling me 80% of real estate agents won't be in 3 years, meaning that I need to really make sure I'm vetting out, because this is what happens. A lot of people have an aunt, uncle, everyone in this room right now knows at least 10 people that are real estate agents, right? So the issue with that is am I picking you because you're my grandma's favorite person or my uncle or my aunt or my best friend's friend, or am I picking you because you can provide the most expertise and, advice to me during this process, right? Yeah. And so that's what happens a lot because, hey, you want my cousin to represent you because you want him to get the commission, but he's your cousin, although supporting him and letting him get the commissions all positive, he may not provide the best expertise for you and stuff like that. And so I always tell people, if you can, pick a real estate agent that not only owns property themselves, but is also a part-time or full-time investor, right? Because most real estate agents will just help you get from A to B. I know people that are fantastic at what they do from a real estate perspective, and they know how to do the contracts left and right, backwards. They can make sure they read all the small print. They're going to advocate on your behalf from that perspective, but they can't give you real advice when it comes to, I like to say, have that dog in them, where like, to me, it's like, if it's not a good, it's like, is this the best possible deal that we can get? Other people are like, can we close it?
It's more transactional.
They're like, I know Anthony will pay $400. I know they'll take this, and we're just going to, they're just trying to close it because, again, they're trying to get that commission to feed their family, right? So that's why, to your point, it's tough to know, like, hey, are you just trying to get another sale? So that's why if you can limit it to people that are actually investors, the way that they're going to speak to you about things is going to be way different because their money is actually on the line. This, every year, every month, the same way that yours will be.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Good. Yeah.
Have you received any helpful advice from close friends or family on what to keep in, what to kind of keep at the forefront of your mind while you go through this process of getting closer?
I think just the main piece of advice is just kind of echoing what you're saying here is start doing the work early, start to prepare, start to do my research as early as possible so that when the right opportunity does present itself that, I'm ready.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, do you have any questions, I guess, for me directly that you could think of on top of your head? I know we talk about stuff all the time, but I don't know if you had anything that sparked.
If you were in my shoes looking for a first-time house, would you be more leaning towards looking for property that's closer to St. Pete that I might be spending a little bit more money on, or would you be, and I guess also this is kind of a lifestyle question too, but like looking maybe a little bit out in the suburbs, that kind of thing, other cities, other areas where you might recommend?
I would try to find the best price. Yeah. Like the best price from the standpoint of, I would say make a list, try to keep it to 10 things because we can, lists can get long. Keep your 10 most important things that you want in a property. And I think if you can get 8 out of those 10 things, it's always going to be a good investment as long as the price reflects, the value of that property. In St. Pete, you're never going to be too far from really anything. Yeah. So I would put, one of the things, for instance, that I would, suggest is find a property that's not in a flood zone. there still is a lot of it.
Right.
And if you negate a flood zone, it's like negating living in an HOA from the perspective of the extra payment per month that you're going to have, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about the PMI that's going to happen if you don't have 20% down or 20% equity in a property, right? An extra $300 you're going to have to pay until you get that equity in the property, or if you put 20% down as your down payment. Same thing with flood insurance. Flood insurance can run you $200-$300 a month. So if you negate that, that's a savings right there, and also alleviates other future risk and stresses that are going to inherently happen as a homeowner. There's always something to fix, always something to do. But to wrap up here, what's one piece of helpful advice that you would give yourself this time last year?
Just easy does it. Like there's always going to be a problem to tackle. There's always going to be new opportunities presenting themselves. I think just not overwhelming myself so much with thinking I need to solve every problem at once. Keep my long-term goals in mind as new problems present themselves, new opportunities present themselves. How can I align those with my long-term goals and not get so overwhelmed with thinking I need to, solve every problem at once? I think that's something I'm always trying to improve on.
Absolutely. Yeah, they always say, everyone says they can multitask, but you see all the studies of people that actually multitask. It's never great, So I think that's good advice, and just keep the main thing and take things day at a time, and just when you take things one by one, you have a higher level of focus that you can obviously do with that thing. So no, I think that's great. That's good advice. And once again, I appreciate you taking the time to come on here, and I'll be here along the way for as you get closer to your home purchase journey. But hopefully somebody can pull from some of the thoughts that you shared today, and it helps them on their own journey.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely,
That's the
man.
goal.
Yeah. Till next time.
Yeah.